We're talking all things Hungary as well as communism here in Budapest on the Father Leo Show. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where we are dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And I've got a very special guest that I just kind of said, we've got to do a quick interview. We weren't completely ready, so hence the very simple technology. But hopefully the message is going to be more important. Talking to Domini, also known as Dominic. Your last name is?
Bulai.
Exactly. Dominic is actually working as a reporter for the EWTN bureau here in Budapest, formerly known as Bonum TV, where my TV show Savoring Our Faith airs. And yesterday he was doing a little clip to interview me here for the Budapest network. But we started talking about communism. We talked about even creepy things, to be honest with you, how he got accosted by some old lady in a nightclub. But that's another story. Maybe that's a product of communism. But we talked more importantly about what it's like to be a young person with your faith in Budapest now. How would you describe your faith in Budapest? Not yours, but the faith of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, that's a question that, I've been trying to figure out myself as well. Because of course now we're talking about Hungary in a way that Hungary is a Christian. It's a Christian country with a cultural Christian culture, Judeo-Christian heritage, and
the Ottoman Empire defended
the Ottoman Empire,
the whole part of the Hungarian Empire. That is,
yes,
protected a lot of Europe from the Muslim invasions from the Ottomans. So it's very Catholic. But right now, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned it, because if anyone is listening to our national anthem, they can get a pretty good idea of what Hungary went through. In fact, our national anthem is a prayer. It invokes God's name, and it talks about the different trials and tribulations that Hungary had in the past centuries. So it's very interesting, because I think we love bragging about our history. We are a very patriotic nation. We love our history. We know it pretty well. But at the same time, I think suffering is something that shaped the Hungarian consciousness, the Hungarian national identity.
It's such a beautiful country, but you can see a lot of disparity. You've got, for example, this beautiful bridge. Yep. You've got the parliament. Then you have some really ugly, communist, blocky, characterless buildings. Is that the suffering you're talking about? Because obviously, suffering brings out ugliness.
That's right. On one hand, it does, but on the other hand, suffering can also bring gratitude. It can also bring simplicity. There was love in Christ's suffering. So now, of course, at the same time, communism, I don't think there's anything beautiful in communism. So if communism cannot produce beauty, because it in itself is, I would say, quite frankly, it's purely evil.
Yeah.
And so communist leaders didn't want you to sit in your room, to pray, to contemplate. They don't want you to contemplate beauty.
Yeah. What's interesting, though, is the empire in Hungary, and obviously it got reduced to a small country in Central Europe. Some people classify it as Eastern Europe. But I've just got to understand, how did communism take over such a strong Christian nation? What were some of the steps that happened that communism became a thing?
Well, Hungary was extremely vulnerable. We were a small country. Now we are a small country. We used to be part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire for decades. And then after the First World War, we lost 2/3 of our country. So I think Hungary, throughout its century, sort of found itself in between the West and the Eastern powers. And that was the same during World War II. And so Hungary, the Hungarian government, the party that was leading the country at that time, they collaborated with the Nazis. And so Hungary found itself on the side of the Nazi and all its allies.
So vulnerability happens when you find yourself divided. And in that vulnerability, evils can take over quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the Nazi Germany, itself was evil, so it did take over.
And when they say Nazi Germany, do they come in with force?
Yep.
Okay.
The bridge behind us, and all the bridges actually were bombed.
Correct.
So it took several decades to rebuild the whole country. And so that was a time Poland had the same exact history in that sense. the Soviet Union took over their country, their leadership, slowly but surely.
I always say that if you want to destroy somebody, destroy the bridge, because it's that which brings
Yeah.
connections. And so, interestingly enough, the word bridge in Latin is pontiff. If the devil wants to destroy the Catholic Church, he's going to destroy the pontiff.
Yeah.
And here now, the Holy Father was here. What year was that when he came for the World Meeting of Families?
That was in 2021. You mean the Eucharistic Congress?
The World Eucharistic Congress, excuse me, 2021, the World Eucharistic Congress, an effort of the Catholic Church to reignite the Catholic faith and identity of Hungary.
Yeah.
Is it working? Did it work? Tell me.
You know, I think the time will tell more. I think there's a lot of good initiatives that started off after the Eucharistic Congress, and even before that, we had a big youth conference. Probably not as big as in Croatia. We have another TV, Laudato TV. They had this huge, massive Catholic conference every single year. But I think that did something to, at least to the Hungarian youth.
The Hungarian youth. Let's talk about it, because you're young.
Yeah.
At present, I mean, what year were you born?
I was 1999.
Okay. And therefore I hate you, but in a Christian way, that is, okay?
Sure.
So 1999, you're a young adult now. Where did you get your faith? Especially in a country that is becoming very secularized.
Well, I was born in a Catholic family. I'm the youngest of 9. So I'm
Is that all?
That's right. Yeah, that's
Your parents are slackers. Amazing.
That's right. Yeah. So
You're kind of like the Ulma family that in Poland, their whole family got canonized or beatified, that is.
That's
okay.
right, yeah.
So one of 9, you're the
the
youngest?
youngest of 9, yes.
Okay.
So there's actually a pretty huge age difference between me and my oldest sister. She could be, quite frankly, my mom.
Sure.
There's 19 years between the two of us. But I didn't really find my place for quite a while. And I think that's something is an issue here in Hungary, is cultural Christianity.
Okay.
Because cultural Christianity cannot proclaim the faith effectively.
It's a part of it.
It's a part of it.
But
right?
it's not
It talks
exclusive.
about the values. It talks about the morals, which is an important part of our Christian faith.
You see the culture of the beauty of the churches.
Exactly.
But if you don't walk in and pray, it's just a pretty building.
Exactly. Cultural Christianity without the actual relationship with Christ is pretty empty.
And that's what you had, cultural Christianity at home?
I think as I was growing up, I was, I guess, in some ways affected by Jansenism.
Okay, that's a big word. We're going to have to break that out for people. Jansenism is basically, can be summed up as God does not smile.
Yeah.
And so you've got to do all things right. And if you don't do it right perfectly, you're not going to go to heaven.
Yeah. And I only figured out like 2 years ago that that's what it was. I looked at God and I thought he was a tyrant. I thought he was a dictator. And up until the age of 14, when I had when I attended a charismatic event, Catholic charismatic event, that's when, he slowly but surely came into my life.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because the spirit of the law helps to balance the letter of the law. And we sometimes focus only on the letter and we forget that God is merciful. His spirit is weaved in there, and it is about a relationship. And it's interesting you said dictator, because that's exactly what you experienced as a communist country.
Yeah.
Dictatorship. Let's jump into that real quick. What did you learn about your history in communism?
Well, I think, I can talk about history, but I think what's very important here is how did it affect us personally?
Correct.
Because, my parents, they were born in 1956, both of them. That's when the communists took over our country. And I love my parents, and I think they're wonderful people. But I think they generation, even though they really tried to fight hard against communism and all the ideology, it can either make you pessimistic, sarcastic, cynical, skeptical, bitter, or it can actually make you more simple. It can make you appreciate simplicity, and it actually can make you more grateful for the smallest things. And I hope my parents are in the latter one, in the latter category. But I think if you come to Hungary, you will experience that Hungarians are very genuine, I think.
Yeah.
They're also very stubborn. They're very welcoming. But the welcoming is sort of mingled with this weird mixture of you know, I welcome you, but I also want to take care of my privacy. I love you, but I'm also kind of like you're
A little standoffish.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like let us not bother each other. I think in a lot of ways. And now this is what you see. You know, the Hungarians, for us, freedom is more, I guess, this passive way of freedom. It's like we don't want to be bothered. We were occupied by many nations in the past 1,000 years, and you know we just want to be normal. We want to be left alone, quite frankly, and you know we just want to cultivate peace and live a simple life, I think.
But this idea of, again, I want to focus on how communism even became so powerful, obviously with force. And you all didn't have weapons here to protect yourselves.
Yeah, not as much as in
So
the U.S. for
a,
sure.
a Second Amendment. And I
Yeah.
kind of want to hear, because you hear about that from a Hungarian European point of view. Everyone in Europe thinks that America is just gun crazy. But if you all had guns, there might have been a fighting chance of some sort. What what is your experience of where America is right now? Because you've spent a lot of time in America. You found your love interest in
That's
America.
right. Yeah.
So you know a little bit more about our culture. How does it kind of compare? Because I personally think that communism is getting a stronger foothold in the minds of young people because we are divided, we are vulnerable, and they're looking for someone to rule them.
Well, I guess I mean I love the U.S. I love the U.S.
America.
very much.
Yeah.
Yes. I wrote my thesis, bachelor's thesis, free speech versus cancel culture. And you know, cancel culture, I guess, manifested itself in Western societies,
Yep.
primarily in the U.S. And I think you can sort of sense this soft totalitarianism in the U.S. on college campuses,
Oh, yeah.
in the media. And I think cancel culture is something that is so close to the communist idea of censorship.
That's what woke people do.
Yeah.
They think that they're enlightened, but they shut down any type of debate. If you ask questions, you're a conspiracist. And if you want your own freedom, or if you want to be able to live your life, and express your opinion, they'll call you every type of bigot, homophobe, anti this, that, and the other. Did that happen here in Hungary?
Well, here in Hungary, you know, a lot of people report their neighbors. It started
They
sort of like
reported it.
They reported
Yeah, during the war.
during the war, well, and during the communist era. That's right. Yeah.
Let's do a little timeline check, okay? Because when did Hungary lose its empire status and become the geographical small country that it is now?
So that was in 1920. That was
1920.
right. Yep, 1920.
Okay.
It's called the Trianon, the Pact of Trianon. That was the peace treaty
Okay.
after World War One.
And then what happened after that, where the war took over in the 1950s, right? Or 1940s.
Yeah,
that
in
is.
1938. Interestingly, that was the first International Eucharistic Congress here in Hungary in
kidding.
1938. Yep. And 2 days later, the second Jewish regulation came into effect. So even at that time, meaning that was when, you know, Jews had to wear particular badges.
Exactly.
So it was a very beautiful and a very sad year for
And they were
us.
forced to wear it to identify them as Jews,
That's right.
because that meant lesser citizens,
Yeah. And that's, of course, the Nazi ideology
Correct.
came into our country.
because they are superior, everyone else is inferior. And then what happened?
And then World War II hit.
Lasted
Eventually
until
lasted until 1944. So in 1944 is when all the bombing of Budapest. That
Okay.
was when there was a lot of, you know, fights on the streets. In fact, my grandmother, this is a beautiful story and a very crazy story, actually. She was about to cross, I can't remember if it's from the Buda to the Pest side or from Pest to the Buda side, with a tram. And she was too late. She couldn't get on, and a lady tried to help her on.
oh
the
my
tram.
gosh.
And she was like, "No, that's okay. Don't worry." And as she saw the tram going, a bomb hit the bridge, and the tram fell in the river. And of course, everyone on board died.
That is tragic.
Yes. And interestingly, my grandma would tell us stories that the Nazi soldiers would come into their basement during the bombing of Budapest and would offer chocolate. But the Soviets, what they offered was punch. They treated, because
So
they were under
interesting.
drugs. They were
So the
drunken.
Nazis came in with not only guns but also a soft sell to try to win them over, or
I think, there was a lot of, you can't necessarily generalize that everyone was
okay.
so, intrigued by the whole Nazi ideology. There were certainly soldiers who didn't back up the system.
Hmm.
But yeah, like the Soviets, they were different. They were drunk, they were on drugs, uh, and and when they came to set Hungary free, they eventually occupied Hungary, and they
What
took
does that
over.
mean? They came to set Hungary free.
Well, that was their idea,
Set them free from what?
from the oppression, the Nazi oppression.
So this is the crazy part.
Yeah.
Hungary has experienced all sides of dictatorship, from the Nazis, which is a nationalist party, to communism.
Yeah.
And how would you describe that? Because it kind of gets lumped up. They are the extremes of two different sides. But how would you describe Nazism? Excuse me, communism.
Well, communism, I mean, it's a far left, it's a radical idea, that is
Left or right? How
extremely,
would you?
it's left.
Okay.
It's left. But I think, that there's a danger here, especially these days. We can too much focused on the two boxes, our own bubbles. I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative. And, I started to say, I'm a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Catholic first, and then I'm a Hungarian. And, I of course love the conservative ideas, but I did witness a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of sort of the Pharisee spirit,
Sure.
quite frankly, in the conservative community. And again, this comes back to the cultural Christianity part. Without values put actually into practice, without mercy put into practice, without admonishing the sinners, not laughing at them, admonishing the sinners, we're not practicing Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a Catholic, I have to be a follower of Christ first, and then I can talk about conservative values.
Okay. And but the Nazis are one thing. It's a
Yeah,
national pride.
that's right.
Very conservative.
Yeah.
Almost arch conservatism.
Yes.
Because they
Some
become
might say.
Pharisees, and those who know their
Nationality.
culture,
Yeah.
nationality, they're the ones in charge.
Yeah.
Communism, on the other hand, it is a very social. I don't even know how to describe it. They
Well,
want everyone to be equal except for people who know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're trying to focus on the elites, those in charge. Those are the ones who are running, and everyone else is equal except them.
Correct. So we have socialism, which can be considered, I mean, I'm breaking this down for simplicity purposes. On the left, they want everyone to be equal. It eventually leads to who knows their culture more. That's Nazism. It's a party that is very conservative, but they become in charge, almost a Pharisee. And communism is kind of like the combination of both these extremes where only elites are in charge.
Yeah. And the elite is trying to sell you a product that is clearly not working,
Because they become God.
basically. Exactly.
And now, so many years, 50, 70 years after, when did communism, quote unquote, end for you all here?
Well, it was in 1989/1991.
Correct? Significantly made by, like, what were the efforts that led to it?
Well, I mean, it was just falling apart. Of course, the U.S. had a major role in destroying the communist beast, as you can say that. But of course, the
How did you
nations.
hear that? I mean, growing up, you were born in 1999. What was taught to you in history about us loudmouth Americans?
I think for us Hungarians and for all Europeans, of course, I think in the beginning we'll look towards the U.S. as, I guess, in some ways, and I know it sounds very odd and very not healthy, but I guess it's saviors, you know. But then, of course, as the U.S. started to shift towards more extreme, more radical left wing politics, I think that's when we start to see that, uh, the neighbor's garden, it's not always greener.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Now, how do they see Americans?
I think it depends.
On
It
which
depends.
side you're looking at?
Exactly. Yeah. Because now I look at Americans. I think the Americans, my fiance's family, beautiful Catholic family.
So you can't say anything bad about that.
I certainly can't, and I couldn't.
Sure.
In fact, I think they're practicing their faith extremely beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
They're actively discipling people and other families.
Great.
And so, I think you see that it's a small community of Catholics who actually want to practice and proclaim the faith
Mm-hmm.
well. And then now, of course, you see this sort of lukewarm Christianity light
Sure.
version practiced as well.
You know, after going through a lot of really terrible things here in Hungary, you said it, the people here are generally joyful. They are very welcoming, but they are definitely more formal when it comes to guests. What do you think communism does to the mind? How has it affected your parents' generation?
I think, I often sense this sort of, this is okay as it is.
They don't want to
I
continue to
think,
grow and
as communism, destroys beauty, it also destroys creativity. It also destroys your flexibility. And I think this is a warning sign for the U.S., but not only the U.S., but also for all the Western countries who are playing with the toy called communism, that, you got to be careful. You got to be careful because this is a dangerous ideology, something that really, in some ways, kills the heart, kills the soul, and kills part of your personality.
so you got back into the faith because you went to a charismatic
That's right.
experience. How did this change you?
I think what really changed me, because at one point, I was even thinking of leaving the Catholic Church, and then I attended in 2016 the Word Youth Day in Krakow, and then I experienced the body of Christ in its fullness. And then I went to Ireland. I was a net ministries missionary for 2 years, and that was the first time I was reminded that the Eucharist is actually Jesus.
Correct. Yeah.
Because I think we're going through the motion, first Holy Communion, then confirmation, and no one is reminding you that, hey, like, that's the sacrament is Jesus itself. That you're encountering the body, the soul, the body, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ.
How do you see yourself as a good Hungarian?
I don't know if I'm a good Hungarian.
Well, you are Hungarian. Well, you speak English like an American, so that's a great thing for me because I only know a couple things in Hungarian, generally things related to food. So, but I mean, you're obviously proud enough to work for a Hungarian Catholic TV station. But so, how do you see yourself as trying to preserve Hungary? What are the qualities that make you a Hungarian?
I think I'm most proud of simplicity. I love the simple way of life that is here in Hungary. I love how genuine Hungarians are. And I mentioned welcoming. I do think Hungarians are welcoming. A lot of people would say I am studying at the university here, and there are international students, and I asked them, "Do you think Hungarians are racist?" And it's interesting because I don't think we are. I think it's more of this sort of, I don't really know you, and so I just want to be careful because we had a lot of bad experiences in the past. But once you actually figure out that the other person is amazing, it's awesome, or not, then of course that's gonna change your attitude towards them. But I think Hungarians, that's simplicity, and of course we are patriotic, we are proud of our nation. And yes, Christianity is something that still dwells in the Hungarian soul, and we want to give something to the world.
If anyone is listening to this and they say, what are some of the takeaways? What would be some of the takeaways you'd like for people to have after hearing your story?
Do not take faith for granted.
Don't take faith for granted. There you go. Well, Dominic, thank you
so
for
much, Father.
time to join us. I hope you all enjoyed this very, how shall I say, spontaneous interview with Dominic, and your last name, Pillai?
Pillai, yep.
Pillai. And I should work on my Hungarian. But more importantly, I think we need to pay attention to the signs that led to the destruction of their country and what it takes to rebuild it. And faith is a part of it. Thanks for listening. I'll be coming back to you with my kind of carry-out order. What did I hear from all of this, which you can definitely listen to if you are part of our Patreon community. So make sure that you tell family and friends to click and subscribe on our YouTube channel and support us on Patreon so that we can continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary. God bless you. Stay hungry for God.